If you're a fan of the Harry Potter movies but haven't read the books, boy oh boy is there a lot to fill you in on. Over the course of a few months, I made a video series titled Things Harry Potter fans wouldn't know if they didn't read the 7 Harry Potter books. I did 5 parts of this, and I decided to put it all together to make a mega video, going over 150 details. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and sharing. It will greatly help the channel with the algorithm. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, and you can also follow me on all of my other social medias, all of which are linked down below, and all of which house similar content that I make here on this channel. Now, enjoy this hour-long plus video. 1. Umbridge was the one who sent the Dementors to Little Whinging. Yep, that's right, movie watchers. Add another thing that will make you hate Umbridge even more. She was the one who sent the Dementors to attack Harry, knowing it would force him to use magic, thus giving the Ministry a reason to go after him and slander him even more. Absolutely infuriating. If the movies added that, Umbridge would get even more hate than she already does. 2. Peter Pettigrew takes his own life. We saw Pettigrew in the 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 7th film, meaning he got a decent amount of screen time. That's why it's pretty shocking that the films did not finish his arc the way the book did, instead just having him be stunned by Dobby in a comedic way. This scene was anything but comedic in the book though. Peter uses the silver hand that Voldemort gave him to choke himself to death. This was brought on when Harry tells Peter that he owes him for saving his life in The Prisoner of Azkaban. Harry and Ron try to pull his silver hand away from his throat, but alas, they're unable to, and Wormtail dies down in the cellar. Definitely a big and very monumental change from book to movie. 3. Harry's father James, along with Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew, created the Marauders map. The film introduces us to the map and even goes over the nicknames the 4 boys gave each other in their Hogwarts days.
Messrs. Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs are proud to present the Marauders map.
However, I was pretty shocked to realize that the film never tells you that Mooney is Lupin, Padfoot is Sirius, and Prongs is James, nor that those 4 made the Marauders map. The film also fails to tell you that Harry's father, like Sirius and Peter, was an animagus who could turn into a stag, which also happens to be Harry's Patronus, a stag. 4. Mad-Eye Moody was the mentor of Nymphadora Tonks. The movie has both of these characters present in the films, but the movies fail to tell you that Moody was training Tonks to be an Auror, which is a huge honor considering that Moody was arguably the best Auror of all time back in the day and was retired. To have him come out of retirement to train Tonks was a huge deal. During the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, both Tonks and Moody were seriously injured, and a bloody Mad-Eye crawled over to where Tonks was and tried to revive her, not caring about his own injuries. These two had a very strong bond that you would never know if you had only watched the films. 5. Firenze the Centaur became a Hogwarts professor. We met Firenze in the first movie, but we never see him again after that. In the books though, we do see him later on, as Dumbledore actually brings him in to teach divination after Professor Trelawney was fired by Umbridge. Dumbledore brought Firenze in as fast as he could to ensure that the Ministry didn't fill the position with their own hire just like they did with Umbridge. 6. Cho Chang is older than Harry, Ron, and Hermione. This one is funny to me because when I made my video on Cho Chang way back when, so many people did not know this fact and was commenting that I got the years wrong. I literally had to add a pinned comment to let everyone know. And I get it, because the movies actually had Cho be at Hogwarts when Harry arrived back to the castle during the events of the Deathly Hallows, and she was wearing the Hogwarts uniform. This obviously makes movie watchers think she's the same age as Harry, both being in their 7th year during the events of the Deathly Hallows, had Harry gone of course. However, in the book, Cho had graduated at the end of the Half-Blood Prince. She did come back for the battle, but she was not a student. She came back as a fully educated adult and came through the Hog's Head. 7. Percy Weasley disowned his family. This one cuts deep for book readers, and once I go over this, it will cut deep for movie watchers as well. Welcome to the club. When the Ministry went after Harry in the Order of the Phoenix, all of the Weasleys supported Harry and helped with the Order of the Phoenix. All of course, except Percy. Percy actually sided with the Ministry, backing Fudge and even Umbridge. He also told his father that he held him back with his career because of his embarrassing obsession with Muggles. He also said that Mr. Weasley wanting to work with Muggles was the reason the family was poor. Yeah, it got pretty heated. To add to that, when Mrs. Weasley went to Percy, he slammed the door in his mother's face. Everyone thought Percy would come back to the family once it was proven that the Ministry was wrong about Harry and wrong about Voldemort being back. But Percy still stuck to his guns, refusing to interact with his family. It wasn't until the final battle that he rejoined them and made amends for all of his mistakes. 8. Fenrir Greyback was the werewolf that bit Remus Lupin. Greyback was heavily utilized in the Half-Blood Prince film, being a part of 3 major scenes, and was also in both Deathly Hallows movies. However, the movies never told us that he was the one who bit Remus Lupin when he was a child, meaning Greyback was the reason that Lupin was a werewolf. 9. Hermione fought for house elf rights. The movies never even hinted to the fact that Hermione was obsessed with freeing house elves and changing the stigma around them. She formed an organization in the 4th book called SPEW, or the Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare. Hermione was so passionate about this that when she found out house elves made the food at Hogwarts, she went on a hunger strike. Also, this obsession with house elf rights was the basis of Ron and Hermione's first kiss in the novel. What made Hermione leap at Ron and kiss him was Ron saying that they had to get the house elves out before the battle started. This is a pretty crucial part of Hermione's character that you would never know if you only saw the movies. 10. Harry's wand was used to cast the Dark Mark at the Quidditch World Cup. As wild as that probably sounds to people who have only seen the films, it's true. Barty Crouch Jr. actually sat behind the trio during the game while under an invisibility cloak, and while there, he stole Harry's wand. Later that night, he cast the Dark Mark in the sky, but unlike in the movie where he did it after the Death Eaters attack, Barty Jr. did it during the attack, doing it to scare the Death Eaters away, who he resented for not seeking out their fallen master. 11. Voldemort killed his father. In the opening chapter of the 4th novel, we learn that Tom Riddle Sr., along with his mother and father, aka Voldemort's grandparents, were found dead by Muggles in their home. The Muggle police were stumped, because nothing was wrong with their bodies other than the fact that they were dead, which is of course because the killing curse was used on them. Then in the Half-Blood Prince novel, we get more detail on this, as we find out that Voldemort himself was the one who carried this out, killing his father and grandparents. Though we inferred as much from the first chapter of the 4th book. 12. Petunia Dursley asked Albus Dumbledore if she could go to Hogwarts. Another thing that probably sounds absolutely crazy to non-book readers. The movies gave nothing but evidence that Petunia hated magic in the wizarding world.
Freak! Come here!
But the book actually showed little snippets here and there that showed that she was just envious of those who had magic, and she wished that she had it too. This was fully confirmed in the final book when we went through the Prince's Tale. One of Snape's memories was him and Lily finding a letter from Dumbledore replying to Petunia saying that he was sorry, but she couldn't come to Hogwarts. 13. Gellert Grindelwald had a redemption. With the prequel Fantastic Beasts films, movie watchers are very aware of Gellert Grindelwald as he was the main villain in that series. Movie watchers also saw an older Grindelwald in Deathly Hallows Part 1, and in that scene, he tells Voldemort that the Elder Wand was buried with Dumbledore.
The Elder Wand
lies with him, of course. Dumbledore.
Allowing Voldemort to get the most powerful wand in the world. However, this scene is very different in the book. Grindelwald does not help Voldemort. In fact, he refuses to tell the Dark Lord anything, leading to Voldemort killing him. Dumbledore later reflects on this in the chapter King's Cross, saying that Grindelwald felt remorse for all the damage he had caused, and this was his way of making amends and his way of protecting Albus in his grave. 14. Rita Skeeter is an animagus. The films featured Rita Skeeter in the 4th movie, but they left a ton out. We find out in the book that she's an unregistered animagus who can turn into a beetle. Unregistered meaning she didn't file this ability with the Ministry of Magic, which is the law if you become an animagus. Her turning into a beetle was how she was getting her information for all of the articles she wrote that gossiped about Harry, Hermione, Krum, and even Hagrid, who she outed as a half-giant. She would just turn into a beetle to sneak around the grounds and listen to get stories. At the end of the book, Hermione actually captures Rita in a jar, keeps her imprisoned in there, and blackmails her, which is another thing that might come as a shock to those who have only seen the movies. This is very unlike the perfect movie version of Hermione. This is something that you would never think she would do if you only saw the films. But that's a topic for a whole other video. 15. Ron and Hermione were prefects. We were introduced to the idea of prefects as well as head boy and head girl from Percy Weasley.
Prefects will lead our house back to the dormitories.
Excuse me, I'm head boy.
What the films didn't mention though was that going into their 5th year, both Ron and Hermione were chosen as the Gryffindor prefects for that year, meaning they took on a disciplinarian role, their job being to make sure no one broke the rules. Mrs. Weasley was so excited that Ron was chosen that she bought him a new broomstick for that year. 16. Nearly Headless Nick was denied by the Headless Hunt. We met Nearly Headless Nick in the first movie and saw him again in the second film. What the second movie left out though was Nick's death day party. He invited a whole room full of ghosts, and at this party, we find out that the Headless Hunt, which is obviously famous outside of the series and folklore, had denied Nick to join because his head was not fully cut off like all of theirs, which greatly upset Nick. 17. Dobby worked at Hogwarts. Dobby only made an appearance in the 2nd and 7th films, but he was present in the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th book. For most of this, he was made one of the house elves that cooked and cleaned for the school, and he was one of the first, if not the first house elf ever to actually get paid. After being freed from the Malfoys, Dumbledore agreed to pay him for his service in the kitchens, which Dobby was thrilled about. Him working for Hogwarts made him see Harry many times over the course of books 4 to 6, and many of those moments were given to Neville in the films, as Dobby was the one who found the Room of Requirement for the DA, and he was the one who gave Harry Gillyweed for the second task of the Triwizard Tournament. 18. Harry funded Fred and George's joke shop. We saw the twins' joke shop, Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, in a truly incredible scene during the Half-Blood Prince film. What people who haven't read the books might not know though, is that the twins were able to purchase this location in Diagon Alley because Harry gave them the money he got for winning the Triwizard Tournament. Harry made them promise never to tell their mother, who greatly disapproved of them going down this career path, but it proved to be highly successful. Harry refused to be paid back though, but the twins ensured that Harry got anything he wanted from the shop for free. 19. There was a taboo on Voldemort's name in the Deathly Hallows. One thing the movies left out was that when Voldemort took over the Ministry, the Death Eaters and the Snatchers were able to put a taboo in place, which meant that anybody who said Voldemort's name out loud would lead them right to the person that said it, using the same sort of method they used to catch underage wizards using magic outside of school. The reason they chose the word Voldemort was because the only people who would say his actual name instead of you-know-who or the Dark Lord were people who were defying him. This taboo was actually what led Snatchers to the trio in the book. 20. Kreacher the House Elf had a redemption. The movies only showed the grumpy, mudblood hating side of Kreacher, but they skipped over the fact that he actually had a redemption. He told the trio the story of R.A.B. or Regulus Arcturus Black, who was the first to figure out that Voldemort had a Horcrux. Kreacher had helped his master get the locket, and he watched Regulus die right in front of him. After the trio heard this, they started to be much kinder to Kreacher, and it made all the difference, as he treated them super well, even making them fabulous meals. On top of that, he led the house elves from the Hogwarts kitchens into battle, fighting for his master Regulus. 21. Gilderoy Lockhart spent many years in the hospital after losing his memory. Gilderoy Lockhart played a massive role in the second movie, which ended with him being blasted by his own memory charm, but he was never seen again in the films. However, the books followed up on this. We next see him in the permanent spell damage ward at St. Mungo's Hospital, where he still had his memory wiped 3 years later. He got a bit of it back, remembering how to sign autographs, which might be the most Lockhart thing ever. But other than that, he was pretty much the same as when we saw him at the end of the second installment, and it didn't look like he was getting any better. 22. The Sorting Hat sings a song every year. What non-book readers wouldn't know is that every year, the Sorting Hat sings a song, normally about the houses or the history of Hogwarts, but other times, he would sing about the current state of the world as he did in the Half-Blood Prince. He of course heard everything going on because he lives in the headmaster's office all year, so he was up to date on the state of everything, and he was not hesitant to share his opinions. 23. Neville Longbottom was almost the chosen one instead of Harry. We all know, movie watchers included, that the prophecy was about Harry and Voldemort. However, what people who have only seen the movies don't know is that the prophecy could have been about Neville too. Each phrase foretold could be about Neville, as he was born at the end of July and his parents had defied Voldemort 3 times just like Harry's parents. The only reason it wasn't about Neville though is because Voldemort chose to go after Harry on October 31st, 1981, thus setting the prophecy in stone. Had Voldemort gone after Neville that fateful night though, the prophecy would have been about him instead of Harry. 24. Ron played Quidditch in his 5th year. Ron of course played Quidditch in The Half-Blood Prince, but what people who have only seen the movie don't know is that he played the year before that. As mentioned earlier in the video, Ron got a new broomstick before his 5th year for becoming a prefect, and he used that to try out for keeper. He made the team, but he got really in his head, especially when Draco Malfoy and the Slytherins started chanting a song called "Weasley is our king," which basically said that Ron always let the quaffle in, letting the other team get an easy victory. However, at the end of the year, Ron played amazingly, actually securing a championship for Gryffindor, and the Gryffindors turned the "Weasley is our king" song into a chant to celebrate Ron rather than to tear him down. 25. Voldemort put a curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts job. If movie watchers ever wondered why there was a new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher every single year, the reason is because of Voldemort. Voldemort was actually promised by the former headmaster, Professor Dippet, that he could teach at Hogwarts when he got older. However, when he came back a decade later, Dumbledore was the headmaster, and he refused to give the job to Voldemort. Voldemort was so mad that before leaving the castle, he put a curse on the Defense Against the Dark Arts position, thus making every teacher who took on that role only last 1 year. 26. Cho Chang did not betray Dumbledore's army. In the film, we saw Cho betray the DA, which we later found out was because Umbridge used truth serum on her. However, in the book, Cho had nothing to do with Umbridge busting the group. It was actually Cho's friend Marietta Edgecombe who ratted them out, mainly because she was scared of ruining her mother's ministry career if they were caught. What she didn't know was that without telling anyone, Hermione put a curse on the document they signed, which ruthlessly made whoever broke the pact get the word sneak permanently written across their face, spelled out in pimples. Hermione made this girl forever have that on her face. It never went away. Which again does not sound like the perfect movie version of Hermione. The Hermione in the books is a very different character than the one in the film. But again, that's a topic for another video. 26. We met Narcissa Malfoy in the 4th installment, not the 6th. In the films, we're introduced to Narcissa Malfoy in the 6th movie, The Half-Blood Prince. But in the books, we actually meet her for the first time in the 4th book at the Quidditch World Cup. She and her family sat in the Minister's box, which also included Harry, Hermione, and the Weasleys, who had gotten a special invite to also sit in the Minister's box, the best seat in the house. Narcissa was her normal snobbish self, which was of course both Harry and the audience's first impression of her, whereas in the movies, our first impression of her was very different, as we see her protecting her son. 28. Harry and Ginny break up. At the end of the Half-Blood Prince book, Harry actually breaks up with Ginny at Dumbledore's funeral, saying that being with her would put her in too much danger. This means that the two were not together while Harry was at the Weasleys before and during the wedding, nor when he was on the run. It was only after the Battle of Hogwarts that they got back together. To be fair though, it was pretty hard to tell that they were actually a couple in the 6th movie. But either way, non-book readers never knew that they broke up. 29. Sybil Trelawney is an alcoholic. Sybil was a very weird character both in the book and in the film. A big part of this, as we find out in book 6, is that she was a heavy drinker. Harry found her getting rid of a whole handful of empty alcohol bottles, throwing them in the room of requirement. In that moment, Harry discovered why she always locked herself up in her tower and why she rarely joined others in the rest of the castle. She was upstairs drinking by herself. As an alcoholic myself, that definitely sounds like alcoholic behavior. And finally, 30. Hagrid's motorbike is actually Sirius's motorbike. In the first chapter of the first book, when Hagrid arrives, he tells Dumbledore and McGonagall that he got this motorbike from Sirius Black, which at the time didn't mean anything until we got to the Prisoner of Azkaban a few years later. Then Hagrid drunkenly elaborates on this story in the 3rd book. The movie left this out too though, so non-book readers never knew that the bike originally belonged to Sirius, which makes it funny that it's called Hagrid's motorbike. Recently, I made a video about 30 things Harry Potter fans wouldn't know if they didn't read the books, and you guys seem to like it, so I decided to make a part 2. 1. Narcissa and Bellatrix have a third sister. Movie watchers know these two sisters, but what fans of the films don't know is that Nymphadora Tonks' mother Andromeda is the third sister in the Black family. There's actually a tiny little Easter egg that has her name in the 5th movie, but if you didn't read the books, you would have no idea what this Easter egg really was. Andromeda was actually disowned by Bellatrix and Narcissa, all because she married a Muggle-born named Ted Tonks, who was of course Nymphadora's father. 2. Harry and George beat the shit out of Malfoy. After Malfoy said some pretty out-of-pocket things about Harry's parents, the Weasleys' parents, and sprinkled in a little bit of blood purity racism, Harry and George turned around after a Quidditch match, and they said to hell with magic, and just started wailing on Draco with their fists. Without Crabbe and Goyle there to protect him, he got his ass handed to him. Harry beat him so badly that his knuckles were bruised afterwards. 3. Sirius left Grimmauld Place to Harry in his will. Before Sirius died, he left everything he owned to Harry. This included his family home Grimmauld Place, which was the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. This also meant that Harry was left Kreacher the House Elf, now being the Elf's master. Harry decided to let the Order continue to use the house as their headquarters, and he sent Kreacher to work in the Hogwarts kitchens. 4. Snape tried to kill Neville's toad, Trevor. Yeah, this one makes even Snape supporters question his morality. Movie watchers met Trevor in the first film. Later in the series, Snape told Neville during a potions class that he would test the shrinking potion Neville was making on his toad at the end of the class, and if it was even slightly wrong, it was fatally poisonous. Snape said this knowing that Neville messed up pretty much every potion he made, but luckily Hermione whispered in Neville's ear, making sure he made it correctly, something that made Snape take 5 points away from Gryffindor because he was salty the toad didn't die. Yeah, not a good look for Snape. He's way worse in the books than he was in the movies. 5. Crookshanks was the real hero in The Prisoner of Azkaban. The movie went over Crookshanks, Hermione's cat, going after Ron's rat, Scabbers.
Ronald has lost his rat.
I haven't lost anything. Your cat killed him.
But what the film left out was the fact that Crookshanks knew that Scabbers was really Peter Pettigrew and was actually working with Sirius. At one point, Harry sees Crookshanks and a shaggy black dog, which is of course Sirius in his animagus form, walking along the grounds together late at night. Crookshanks does everything he can to help Sirius, even stealing a list of passwords for the Gryffindor common room that Neville wrote down so that Sirius could get in and kill Pettigrew himself. On top of that, Crookshanks lies on Sirius's chest to protect him in the Shrieking Shack. All along, Crookshanks was the real hero. 6. Harry used the Elder Wand to fix his broken wand. The film showed Harry's wand being broken into 2.
As we were leaving Godric's Hollow, I cast a curse and it rebounded.
A wand being broken like that is irreparable.
I tried to mend it, but wands are different.
It's done.
That is, unless you're the master of the most powerful wand in the world. After the Battle of Hogwarts, Harry used the Elder Wand to fix the wand he had gotten all those years ago at Ollivander's. 7. Sirius Black was not the first person to escape Azkaban. If you've only seen the films, your belief is that Sirius was the first person to escape the wizarding prison.
How did he escape?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? He's the first one that done it.
But book readers know that this is not actually true. The first person to escape Azkaban was Barty Crouch Jr., the same man that took on the identity of Mad-Eye Moody in the Goblet of Fire. Barty Jr. did this with the help of his parents, as Barty Crouch Sr. and his wife visited their son, and while there, Barty Jr. and his mother switched places, which the Dementors didn't know because they were blind. Mrs. Crouch died in Azkaban, while Barty Jr. was set free. 8. You need a license to apparate and disapparate. The films show apparating and disapparating many times, but what the films left out is that you need to pass a test to be able to do so, much like a driver's license in the Muggle world. Hogwarts hosted a whole lesson with the 6th years where they had to learn to apparate to small places in the Great Hall. Hermione ended up passing her test, but Ron failed because he left half an eyebrow behind. Meanwhile, Harry was too young to take the test because he didn't turn 17 until the summer. 9. Rufus Scrimgeour gave his life protecting Harry. In the Deathly Hallows Part 1, Kingsley's Patronus told all the wedding guests that the Minister of Magic was dead.
Minister of Magic is dead.
This of course referred to Rufus Scrimgeour, who appeared in the first scene of the movie. What the film left out though, was that Scrimgeour died at the hand of Voldemort himself when he refused to give up Harry's location, dying a true hero. 10. Draco put Madame Rosmerta under the Imperius Curse for an entire school year. Movie fans met Madame Rosmerta in The Prisoner of Azkaban.
Madame Rosmerta. Ron fancies her.
That's not true.
But they didn't learn much about her except for the fact that she was the landlady of the Three Broomsticks. Her role was furthered in the Half-Blood Prince novel though, as Draco put her under the Imperius Curse. Movie fans probably wondered how the cursed necklace got to Katie Bell, or how Slughorn's gift to Dumbledore was poisoned. This was all the doing of the Imperius Rosmerta under Draco's orders. 11. Dumbledore's funeral. One of the most memorable moments in the Half-Blood Prince book was the funeral of the fallen headmaster. The movie had that nice moment where everyone raised their wands for Dumbledore, but the book actually had a traditional funeral instead. There, loads of friendly faces showed up, including Maxime, Kingsley, Moody, Lupin, Tonks, Molly, Arthur, Bill, Fleur, Mrs. Fig, and a few others. And there were also some not-so-friendly faces there, like Cornelius Fudge, Dolores Umbridge, and Rita Skeeter. All the students were also in attendance, all watching as Hagrid carried Dumbledore to his White Tomb. The Merpeople in the Black Lake, as well as the Centaurs in the Forbidden Forest, came to pay their respects, and Fawkes the Phoenix flew overhead, giving off his Phoenix Lament, or Phoenix Song. 12. Voldemort's mother used a love potion on his father. One of the biggest flops of the films was the fact that they didn't go over Voldemort's full backstory. In that backstory, we find out that the inbred Merope Gaunt, Voldemort's mother, was in love with her handsome muggle neighbor Tom Riddle Sr., aka Voldemort's father. The inbred Merope knew that she had no chance with him, so she decided to use a love potion on Tom. She basically date raped him, but even worse, forcing him to marry her and forcing him to impregnate her, all against his will of course. She eventually stopped giving him the love potion, thinking he'd stay for his unborn baby, but he ran for the hills and didn't look back at his wife or unborn son. 13. James saved Snape's life. Movie fans know that Snape tried to save Harry in the Philosopher's Stone.
Snape was trying to save me.
The reason why he did this was left out, however. Dumbledore tells Harry that Snape spent the last year going above and beyond to save him so that he could be even with James and could go back to hating his father's memory in peace. The way James saved him was explained in The Prisoner of Azkaban. After Sirius told Snape to go through the passage to the Shrieking Shack to find out the truth about Lupin, which Snape was semi-obsessed with, James ran after him and pulled him away from Werewolf Lupin just in time. 14. Draco had a friendship with Moaning Myrtle. Movie watchers know all about Moaning Myrtle's character. But what they don't know is that she had a strong connection with Draco Malfoy. Draco actually confided in Myrtle during the Half-Blood Prince, telling her about his struggles and failed attempts to complete his mission. Malfoy even cried to her on multiple occasions while Myrtle comforted him. 15. The Two-Way Mirror. This will probably close up a confusing plot point for those who have only seen the films. Remember that shattered piece of glass that Harry had, which linked up to another shattered piece of glass that Aberforth had? Yeah, well, these two shattered pieces were part of a two-way mirror that Sirius had given to Harry before he died. They had originally belonged to Sirius and James, which they used to talk to one another when in separate detentions at Hogwarts. After Sirius's death, Harry smashed this mirror, realizing that he could have used it to contact Sirius, and would have known that Sirius wasn't really in Voldemort's clutches. Harry kept that shattered piece of mirror, which still linked up to the other half, which Aberforth had come into possession of, which was a very good thing because it saved their life. 16. The Triwizard Maze had creatures in it. The third task in the movie left out a ton of details, including the many creatures that the champions had to face in there. They encountered blast-ended Scroots, which were monstrous, very dangerous creatures that Hagrid had originally bred for his Care of Magical Creatures class. Not a good look for Hagrid as a teacher there. Champions also faced a Sphinx in the maze, which made them answer riddles. They faced Boggarts, which movie fans saw in The Prisoner of Azkaban, and they also faced Acromantula, which movie fans saw in The Chamber of Secrets. Harry and Cedric actually faced faced one of these acromantulas together, resulting in Harry breaking his leg. Yeah, that's right. Harry faced Voldemort in the graveyard and beat him on a broken leg. Pretty impressive. 17. Neville Longbottom's grandmother fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. Movie fans never actually met Augusta Longbottom, although they did see her wardrobe during Lupin's Defense Against the Dark Arts class. Augusta had actually gone on the run before the battle, as Death Eaters went after her as punishment for Neville's rebellious behavior at Hogwarts that year, and Augusta ended up putting the Death Eater that came after her in the hospital before escaping. She reappeared when it came time for the final battle, and she fought side by side with her grandson, so proud of the man that Neville had turned out to be. 18. Dumbledore saved Umbridge from the Centaurs. The explanation for this is that Dumbledore went into the Forbidden Forest himself and rescued Umbridge. Nobody knew how he managed to do so without sustaining any injury to himself, but that's Dumbledore for you. 19. Lily Potter's letter. Movie fans never saw a pretty large part of The Prince's Tale, which saw Snape reading a letter that Lily Potter had written before she died. It was sent to Sirius, and in it enclosed a picture of Lily laughing at baby Harry as he flew on the toy broomstick that Sirius had gifted Harry for his first birthday. Snape ended up keeping the last page of the letter, which said, "Lots of love, Lily," and he ripped the picture in half, keeping the half that had Lily laughing. Harry found the first page of the letter as well as the other half of the picture that depicted him while the trio was at Grimmauld Place. And from this behind the scenes picture, it looks like they filmed this, but it was never added and never released. 20. Snape was the person who told Voldemort the prophecy. This one was sort of hinted to as Dumbledore tells Snape about the prophecy.
Prophecy did not refer to a woman. It spoke of a boy born at the end of July. Yes.
But it's never specifically said that Snape was the one who brought this information to Voldemort. Snape actually overheard the prophecy when Sybil Trelawney foretold it during her job interview with Dumbledore. Snape being a Death Eater, he told the Dark Lord what he had heard. However, Snape was kicked out before he heard the end of the prophecy, the line that was probably the most important part and which ended up screwing Voldemort over. But getting back to Snape, yeah, he's the reason Harry was an orphan and he's the reason Lily and James died. And on top of that, he wouldn't have even batted an eye if it was another family that wasn't Lily's. He would have just let them die. Another truth bomb to you movie watchers who think Snape is good. Book Snape is so much worse. 21. Umbridge injured Hedwig. As if we needed another reason to hate Umbridge, movie fans can add another fact that will make them loathe this awful character even more. On her orders, Umbridge had Hedwig attacked when intercepting Harry's mail. Hedwig was hurt so badly that the stand-in Care of Magical Creatures professor Grubbly Plank had to nurse her back to health. 22. Draco Malfoy was made a prefect. In part 1 of this series, I mentioned that both Ron and Hermione were made prefects for Gryffindor House, but what I didn't mention was that Draco Malfoy was made the prefect for Slytherin House alongside Pansy Parkinson. The two abused their power, taking points from other houses for small and insignificant reasons, especially from Gryffindor. 23. Dumbledore sent Petunia a howler. Again, in part 1, I went over how Petunia actually asked Dumbledore if she could go to Hogwarts. That was when she was a kid, but they had correspondence with each other during Petunia's adult life as well. When Vernon was about to kick Harry out of the house, and Petunia was ready to let him do so, a howler arrived. Movie fans of course know about howlers as they saw Mrs. Weasley's in the second movie. This howler was a lot shorter though, as it merely said, "Remember my last, Petunia," which immediately made Petunia go against her husband, saying that Harry had to stay. She did this because Dumbledore's howler reminded her of the last letter he wrote her, which explained that Harry had to call Petunia's house his home in order for Lily's love protection to carry on, which was possible because Petunia shared the same blood as Lily, seeing as they were sisters. 24. The Bloody Baron murdered the Grey Lady. We meet the ghost of the Bloody Baron very briefly in the first movie. And we of course meet the Grey Lady in a pretty big scene in the 8th film.
You're the Grey Lady.
What the movie left out was the connection these two had before they died. Before they became ghosts, the Baron was in love with the Grey Lady, or Helena Ravenclaw. When Helena's mother, Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, was dying, she sent the Baron to bring her daughter home so she could say goodbye. When the Baron found Helena, she refused to come with him and rejected his affections. This rejection made the Baron furious, and he stabbed Helena in a fit of rage. Looking at Helena's dead body and having her blood all over him, he couldn't live with what he had done, so he stabbed himself, taking his own life. We get a little nod to Romeo and Juliet there. The two opted to become ghosts when they died, and both decided to reside at Hogwarts, each representing a Hogwarts house, the Baron being for Slytherin and Helena being for Ravenclaw. Though they both lived in Hogwarts, the Baron never bothered Helena, ashamed of what he had done. 25. Remus Lupin made Harry the godfather of his son Teddy. Movie fans know that Lupin and Tonks had a baby together.
It's Teddy who needs you.
He'll sleep till dawn and snore like his father.
But what the movie left out was that Lupin and Tonks decided to make Harry the godfather. This decision came mostly from Lupin, because earlier in the Deathly Hallows book, Remus left a pregnant Tonks to try and join the trio on their mission. Harry called him out for this, saying he should be with his family. Lupin was initially furious and he stormed out, but Harry's words made him return to his family, which Lupin was immensely grateful for. 26. Snape and Quirrell's defenses for the Philosopher's Stone. In the movie, we saw 5 obstacles. Hagrid's being Fluffy, Sprouts being the Devil's Snare, Flitwick's being the keys, McGonagall's being the chessboard, and Dumbledore's being the Mirror of Erised. However, the film left out 2 more, that being Quirrell's obstacle as well as Snape's. Quirrell's was a fully grown troll that guarded the door, which he himself knocked out, meaning Harry and Hermione didn't have to fight it. That's another difference, by the way. Hermione didn't stay with Ron after he was knocked out, she went on with Harry. Meanwhile, Snape's obstacle was a riddle that made you choose between different potions, some of which would allow you to go through the purple and black flames blocking each doorway. Hermione of course figured this riddle out, but there was only enough for one person, which is why Harry went on without Hermione. 27. Percy had a girlfriend named Penelope. Percy had much of his art cut from the films, including the fact that he had a girlfriend during his time at Hogwarts. She was a Ravenclaw student named Penelope Clearwater, and she was a fellow prefect. Percy locked himself in his room at the Burrow during the summer holiday in the Chamber of Secrets, secretly writing letters to his new girlfriend. Percy kept his relationship a secret from his siblings until Ginny walked in on them and spilled the beans. The two dated for the rest of their Hogwarts career, but they broke up after graduating. 28. Hagrid was reunited with Buckbeak. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that Sirius left everything he owned to Harry. This included Buckbeak, who movie watchers will remember was his ride away from Hogwarts at the end of The Prisoner of Azkaban. Sirius cared for Buckbeak, who they renamed Witherwings to protect the Hippogriff's identity. When Harry became Buckbeak's new owner, without hesitation, he said that Buckbeak should go with Hagrid, and Hagrid cared for the Hippogriff from then on. 29. Arthur Weasley and Lucius Malfoy got into a physical fight. The Chamber of Secrets film saw a standoff between Arthur and Lucius at Flourish and Blotts, but this was a lot more heated in the book. After Lucius said the line,
"And I thought your family could sink no lower."
Unlike in the film where Arthur did not engage, Book Arthur ran at Lucius and smashed him against the bookcase. Arthur left the fight with a bloody lip, and Lucius left the fight with a black eye from a book falling on his face. Hagrid broke it up, and Molly was not happy with Arthur after the fight. And finally, number 30, I saved the best for last. Fred and George set Peeves the Poltergeist on Umbridge before they left Hogwarts. Movie watchers know of Fred and George's epic exit from Hogwarts, but the movie left out possibly the best part of this. Before they flew off, they turned to Peeves the Poltergeist, who was a character cut from the films but who caused mischief and chaos in the castle, and the twins told him to give Umbridge hell for them. Peeves never listened to students, but for Fred and George, he not only listened to them, but saluted to them. He kept well on his promise, tormenting Umbridge for weeks. At the end of the school year, he sent her packing by chasing her off while whacking her with a cane, which was the cane that belonged to Professor McGonagall, which somehow mysteriously found its way into Peeves' possession. This is part 3 of things you wouldn't know if you didn't read the Harry Potter books. Number 1. Moaning Myrtle helped Harry even more for the second task. Movie fans of course saw Myrtle help Harry figure out the egg clue, but in the book she went even further. She actually traveled through the pipes from her bathroom to go into the Black Lake during the actual task, and there she pointed Harry in the right direction to find the village of the Merpeople. This is the real reason why Harry reached all of the hostages before any of the other champions did. Number 2. How the Norbert storyline ended. Norbert was of course part of the first film, but the dragon story was sort of left up in the air for movie watchers. In the book, the trio actually helps smuggle the dragon out, handing it off to some friends of Charlie Weasley, Ron's brother. This is what subsequently led to them getting detention. Then later in the series, Charlie actually told Hagrid that Norbert is actually Norberta, as they realized it was a girl dragon, not a boy. Number 3. Sirius signed Harry's permission form. The film went over Harry not being able to go to Hogsmeade in his 3rd year.
But Professor, I thought if you signed it, then I could go.
I can't. Only a parent or a guardian can sign. Since I am neither, it would be inappropriate.
But then all of a sudden, he's able to go in the 5th film. This is because after Sirius's escape on Buckbeak, he sent Harry a piece of paper that read, "I, Sirius Black, Harry Potter's godfather, hereby give him permission to visit Hogsmeade on weekends." This was of course enough for Dumbledore, who knew that Sirius was innocent, so from then on, Harry could go to the village. Number 4. Oliver Wood played professional Quidditch after Hogwarts. Oliver disappeared after the 2nd movie, which I always thought was weird because he was there in the 3rd book, but wasn't present for the Quidditch match. Anyway though, after finishing up at Hogwarts, Harry ran into Wood at the Quidditch World Cup, and Oliver excitedly told Harry that he was the keeper for Puddlemere United's reserve team. Number 5. Charlie Weasley fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. Charlie was of course neglected in the films, but one of my favorite moments for him was in the final battle. Charlie didn't arrive to the battle right away, probably because he was out of country, but when he did, he entered the battle alongside Horace Slughorn, accompanied by hundreds of reinforcements, and this changed the tide in the battle, going in the favor of the good guys. Number 6. Percy's letter to Ron. In part 1 of this series, I went over how Percy disowned his family, but I left out one crucial detail. Percy wrote Ron a letter congratulating him on becoming a prefect. Percy mentions that he was glad Ron didn't take the Fred and George route, and then said that he should stay away from Harry Potter, who Percy believed only got off on a technicality during his trial earlier that year. He then went on to bash Mr. and Mrs. Weasley, saying he was glad he escaped association with such people, the most disrespectful way to refer to your parents. But worst of all, he told Ron to rat Harry out to Dolores Umbridge, who Percy described as a delightful woman. Number 7. Rita Skeeter interviewed Harry about his night in the graveyard. In part 1 of this series, I mentioned how Hermione had dirt on Rita. She used this dirt to make Rita interview Harry about his night in the graveyard when Voldemort returned, and this article made many people realize that the Ministry was wrong and Harry was telling the truth. To her disgust, Rita had to write for the magazine The Quibbler, one of the most laughed at magazines in the wizarding world, which was published by Luna Lovegood's father, Xenophilius Lovegood. Number 8. We were introduced to Bellatrix Lestrange before the Azkaban breakout. The film didn't introduce us to Bellatrix until the Order of the Phoenix, but book readers actually met her in the 4th book, The Goblet of Fire. When Harry fell into the pensive in the book, we didn't just see Karkaroff's trial like in the movie. We also saw the trial of Bellatrix, her husband Rodolphus, his brother Sebastian, and Barty Crouch Jr. They were on trial for torturing Alice and Frank Longbottom, and Bellatrix was her normal self, yelling as she was taken to Azkaban that the Dark Lord would return. Number 9. Lupin's final exam. The 3rd film showed that Lupin was by far the best defense against the dark arts professor we saw during the course of the series, and his final exam only shows that even more. The exam consisted of a series of dark creatures used as obstacles, ending with a boggart inside of a trunk as the final challenge. Harry completed the exam better than anyone, getting full marks. Meanwhile, Hermione's boggart turned into Professor McGonagall, telling her that she had failed all of her exams, and she ran out horror-struck. Ron didn't end up making it to the boggart, instead being stopped by an earlier creature known as a Hinky-Punk. Number 10. Draco, Crabbe, and Goyle's unfortunate end to multiple school years. First, on the train ride home in the Goblet of Fire, Malfoy celebrated Cedric Diggory's death. This led to Harry, Ron, Hermione, Fred, and George all hitting the Slytherins at once, which left them unconscious and in pretty bad shape because of all of the spells being combined. Then on the train ride home in the Order of the Phoenix, the 3 were hit by multiple spells from DA members, and this time it resulted in Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle looking like gigantic slugs in Hogwarts robes. The DA members then put them in the luggage racks above and left them there as ooze dripped out of them. I'm not gonna lie, these scenes kind of left a bad taste in my mouth and always have. I didn't really like how they made the good guys be this evil, I guess you could say. Like, that's pretty messed up. Number 11. Ollivander came to Hogwarts to test the Triwizard Champion's wands. Ollivander only appeared in the first and last film, but in the book, he was actually present for the 4th installment. He was the wand maker who took on the ceremony called the Weighing of the Wands. He inspected all 4 of the champions' wands before the competition to make sure they were all working properly. As he did this, he did not try to hide his contempt for Fleur and Crumb's wands, both of which he thought weren't made to his standards. Number 7. Stan Shunpike fought alongside the Death Eaters in the Battle of Seven Potters. This one probably sounds absolutely ludicrous to people who have only seen the movies. How could the innocent night bus attendant be one of the people going after Harry? Well, in book 6, he had been arrested by the Ministry of Magic after he said he had inside information on the Death Eater's plans when trying to impress a girl. The Ministry took this seriously and locked Stan up, which greatly angered Harry knowing that Stan was innocent. Then, during the Azkaban breakout before the events of the Deathly Hallows, Stan escaped with the Death Eaters, one of whom put him under the Imperius Curse. While under the Imperius Curse, he fought side by side with the Death Eaters, and there's the explanation. Number 13, McGonagall's career meeting with Harry and Umbridge. This is one of the best moments in the books, so get ready, movie fans. Umbridge sat in on McGonagall's career meeting with Harry, where he voiced he wanted to be an Auror. When Umbridge kept rudely interrupting, bashing Harry, and saying that Fudge and the Ministry would never allow that to happen, McGonagall got heated and backed Harry 100%, saying that she would make sure Harry became an Auror if it was the last thing she did. The meeting then ended in a screaming match between McGonagall and Umbridge as McGonagall continued to fight in Harry's corner. This moment truly shows the bond that Harry and McGonagall have made over the course of the series. Number 14. The spell Levicorpus was created by Severus Snape. We saw the spell Levicorpus be used a few times in the movies.
Levicorpus!
And interestingly, in both the book and the movie, we saw James Potter use this very spell on Severus himself. What movie fans don't know is that Snape created the spell Levicorpus during his time at Hogwarts. He wrote it down in his potions book, which was then inherited by Harry. This Levicorpus spell caught fire with everyone at Hogwarts during Snape's time, and even during Harry's time, and even the Death Eaters used it at the Quidditch World Cup, showing just how far it traveled. Number 15. Victor Krum loses the Quidditch World Cup, but catches the golden snitch. Movie fans saw everything leading up to the Quidditch World Cup, but they never actually got to see what happened in the match. The film made it clear that Ireland won.
Sounds like the Irish got their pride on.
But the films left out that Krum, with a broken nose, caught the snitch to end the game. However, it wasn't enough to take home the championship as Bulgaria lost 160 to 170. Krum decided to end the game seeing that his team had no chance, and he wanted to end it on his terms. Number 16. Harry visited the Ravenclaw common room. The film showed us Harry in the Gryffindor common room as well as in the Slytherin common room, but movie fans never got to visit the common room for Ravenclaw. In the book, Harry and Luna went there before the Battle of Hogwarts hoping to find something about the diadem of Ravenclaw. Luna used the knocker shaped like an eagle on the door, and the eagle asked them a riddle as it always did. Which came first, the phoenix or the flame? And Luna answered, a circle has no beginning, and they were granted access. And that brings me into number 17. Harry uses the Cruciatus Curse. This took place while Harry was in the Ravenclaw common room. After Amicus Carrow spit in McGonagall's face, Harry, who was under the invisibility cloak, ripped it off and used the Torture Curse on him. This is another example that shows how strong the bond between Harry and McGonagall is, as this time, Harry stands up for her rather than the other way around as we saw last time. Number 18. Speaking of the Cruciatus Curse, Draco tried to use it on Harry. The movie did a great job showing the intense fight between Harry and Malfoy in the bathroom. However, one thing they left out was Malfoy trying to use the Cruciatus Curse on Harry, which is why Harry used the Sectum Sempra spell on him. This change sort of annoyed me because in the eyes of movie watchers, it made Draco more of a victim and painted Harry in a bad light. I think movie watchers should know that the only reason Harry used the Sectum Sempra spell was because he didn't want to get hit by an unforgivable curse, which I think is valid. Number 19. Harry gave Mad-Eye a proper burial. Mad-Eye was killed off screen, and other than Bill saying that Mad-Eye was dead, they didn't really go over what happened. Going into more detail, Death Eaters took Mad Eye's body before the Order could retrieve it. Umbridge was given his eye, which is why movie watchers saw it in her door at the Ministry. However, the movie once again skipped over a significant detail. Harry actually took the eye out of the door, and after their escape from the Ministry, Harry buried Moody's eye next to the most gnarled and resilient looking tree, which perfectly matched up with Mad Eye's essence in life. Number 20. Ginny flew into the announcer's box during a Quidditch match. In the first film, movie fans saw the announcer's box with Lee Jordan in it. This announcer's box would later be taken over by Zachariah Smith, who was a Hufflepuff seen as sort of a rival to the main Gryffindors. Movie watchers might know of Zachariah Smith, who made brief appearances in the 5th film, but if not, that's him right there. While he was announcing Gryffindor's match, he continuously insulted the Gryffindor team, and after they secured the victory, Ginny flew directly at him in the announcer's box, slamming right into him. When Ginny got up, she looked at Professor McGonagall saying that she forgot to brake. Number 21. Dumbledore punished the Dursleys for their mistreatment of Harry. In parts 1 and 2 of this series, I went over Petunia and Dumbledore sending each other letters. However, I have yet to mention the most notable interaction they had in the books. Dumbledore visited the Dursleys' house at the beginning of the Half-Blood Prince, and he put them in their place. He told them that their mistreatment of Harry was despicable, and that the only good thing that came out of them watching over Harry was that he escaped the appalling damage they had inflicted on their own unfortunate son, of course referring to Dudley. Number 22. The true moment when Harry saw Molly Weasley as a mother. Harry always appreciated Molly and saw her as a caregiver, but it wasn't until he returned from the graveyard that he truly felt this way. Molly joined him in the hospital wing after perhaps the worst experience of Harry's life. She told Harry that it was not his fault. Then as Harry fought back tears, she bent down and put her arms around him. Harry thought to himself that he had no memory of ever being hugged like this, as though by a mother. Being held in Mrs. Weasley's arms made all of Harry's emotions come out as he cried harder than he ever had in his life. Number 23. Molly and Ginny hated Fleur Delacour. When Bill got together with Fleur, his mother and sister greatly disliked her. Fleur spent the summer at the Burrow where Bill hoped she would get closer with his family. However, this had the opposite effect, as Molly and Ginny grew to hate Bill's fiancé. It wasn't until after the Battle of the Astronomy Tower that they finally accepted her. Both of them were shocked when Fleur stood by Bill's side after he had been mauled by Greyback during the battle. He was unrecognizable because of his scars, but Fleur never hesitated when saying that she still loved him and was still going to marry him. Number 24. When Voldemort was a child, he tormented Muggle children in a cave. Movie watchers saw the cave where Voldemort hid one of his Horcruxes, but this cave has a lot more meaning in the book. During a field trip with his Muggle orphanage, Tom took 2 kids named Amy and Dennis to the cave where he hid his Horcrux. Nobody knows what happened in there, but Amy and Dennis were never the same afterwards, and they never divulged a single detail of what happened. This was slightly hinted to in the movie when they showed a picture of the cave in young Tom Riddle's room, but they obviously left out the most chilling details that go along with it. Number 25. Cormac McLaggen knocked Harry out during a Quidditch match. Movie fans know how arrogant Cormac McLaggen is, and honestly, after watching this, movie fans will only come to that conclusion even more. After Ron was hospitalized, Cormac took his place for the next match at Keeper, and it was disastrous. Cormac spent the whole game telling the rest of the team how to play their position rather than watching the rings, which gave the other team several easy goals. Then, Cormac showed the beaters the proper way to swing the bat. As he demonstrated though, he hit the bludger straight at Harry's head, who was only a few feet away, knocking him out and cracking his skull. Number 26. Cho Chang was first introduced in The Prisoner of Azkaban, not the Goblet of Fire. Cho played as Seeker for the Ravenclaw Quidditch team in the 3rd book, and the first time Harry saw her was before their match, and the first thing that Harry noticed was how pretty she was, which made him have a weird feeling in his stomach. Cho and Harry ended up being in a heated race for the snitch during the championship game, a matchup that Harry won. Number 27. Victor Crumb was at Bill and Fleur's wedding. Movie fans only saw Crumb in the 4th film, but in the book, we see him again when he was a guest at Bill and Fleur's wedding. He was reunited with Hermione, who he complimented on how good she looked. However, Ron made it clear where he and Hermione stood as he took her away from Crumb to go dance. Crumb also thought about hitting on Ginny, but was quickly shut down by Harry. From behind the scenes photos, it looks like this was actually filmed, but it didn't make the final cut of the film, nor did it make the cut for the official deleted scenes on the bonus disc. All we have is just these few pictures. Number 28. Arthur Weasley blew up the Dursleys' living room. This one probably sounds pretty crazy to movie fans. When Mr. Weasley went to pick Harry up from the Dursleys to go to the Quidditch World Cup, he made the Dursleys' fireplace part of the Floo network. When he got there though, he realized that the Dursleys had an electric fireplace, meaning that he, Ron, Fred, and George were stuck behind it. The only thing Arthur could think to do was blow through the wall, absolutely destroying the Dursleys' living room. Things then got even worse when the twins accidentally dropped their experimental candy on the floor. They knew that Dudley would eat it, and when he did, his tongue started to grow at a rapid pace. Arthur fixed both Dudley's tongue and the living room, but not before Vernon started throwing things at him. Number 29. Neville's candy wrappers. Movie fans sort of know what happened to Neville's parents as they make a small reference to it.
Neville's parents.
They suffered a fate worse than death, you ask me.
However, this story is far from being fleshed out in the films. There is a moment in the book where the trio, along with Ginny, run into Neville visiting his mom and dad at St. Mungo's Hospital. They're interrupted by his mother Alice, who had been tortured into madness alongside her husband Frank. She hands Neville a gum wrapper, and Neville looks at her and says, "Thanks, Mom." Neville then turned to his friends as if daring them to laugh, but Harry thought to himself that he had never seen anything less funny. As Neville and his gran left, she told Neville to throw the wrapper out because he had enough to paper his entire wall. Neville did not throw it out, however, instead slipping it in his pocket. This was the closest he would ever get to his parents, these candy wrappers that he cherished. And finally, number 30, I saved the best for last. Hagrid's escape from Hogwarts. This might be one of the craziest sequences in all of the books, and I still can't believe that the movies cut it out. In the Order of the Phoenix, Umbridge, accompanied by 5 Aurors, tried to arrest Hagrid. It did not go how she expected, however, as Hagrid decided to take on the 5 Aurors single-handedly. They were absolutely shaken when their stunning spells just bounced off his thick giant skin. Hagrid took one Auror out by throwing him 20 feet in the air for stunning his dog Fang. Then when McGonagall came out to defend Hagrid and was hit by 4 stunning spells in the chest, an enraged Hagrid took out 3 more of the Aurors. The last one remaining stepped back from Hagrid so fast that he tripped over one of his knocked out comrades and fell over. Hagrid then picked up Fang and ran for it, completely unhurt. It was truly an amazing moment that showed just how deadly our favorite half-giant can be. You guys liked the first 3 parts, so I might as well make a part 4. Today we're going to go over 30 more details that you wouldn't know if you didn't read the Harry Potter books. Number 1. Dudley was too fat to fit in his school uniform. Smeltings, the private school Dudley went to, sent a letter home to Mr. and Mrs. Dursley telling them that they did not stock clothes big enough for Dudley because he had gotten too fat. The novel said that Dudley had reached roughly the size and weight of a baby killer whale, which when you think about it is absolutely wild. How did Mr. and Mrs. Dursley let it get to this point? To fix this problem, the school nurse devised a diet program for Dudley, which basically made him eat nothing but healthy food for the whole summer. Petunia decided to make the whole family do this as well, which did not sit well with Vernon, who called all of this rabbit food. Number 2. Dean Thomas was imprisoned in Malfoy Manor. In the film, the trio, Luna Lovegood, Griphook, and Dobby were the only people that were locked up in Malfoy Manor and that escaped. But in the book, Dean Thomas was there as well. He was kidnapped because he was a Muggle-born. Although after the series ended, we found out that Dean was not actually a Muggle-born. I made a whole video on this if you want to check it out. It's linked up there and also in the description. But anyway, after Dean escaped with everybody, he was not only at Malfoy Manor, but was also there to bury Dobby as well. Number 3. Padma Patil is actually in Ravenclaw, not Gryffindor. They did some really weird stuff with the Patil twins. They had Padma be in Gryffindor instead of Ravenclaw, and they sort of replaced Lavender Brown as Parvati's best friend with her twin sister. Also, they made them not be identical twins like they were in the movies, hiring 2 girls that were not at all related. And then they cut Parvati from the final movie, instead having Padma be the main Patil twin in the battle. Very weird choices. I don't know why they did that. Number 4. Sirius Black lived in Hogsmeade. The only time the fourth film showed Sirius was when he was in the fire talking to Harry. But in the novel, Sirius actually traveled back to Hogwarts when Harry told him his scar was hurting. Something that Harry wasn't too thrilled about because Sirius coming back made him really worried that Sirius would be captured. When the school had a Hogsmeade trip, the trio met Sirius in Hogsmeade Village, and they spent a few hours talking about all sorts of plot lines. Most of these plot lines being stuff that the film actually left out. Number 5. Hagrid and Maxime went to recruit giants for the Order of the Phoenix. The film talked about this moment when Hagrid got back.
Dumbledore sent me to parley with the giants, try to convince them to join the cause. But I wasn't the only one that was trying to win them over. Death Eaters.
But the information we got in the movie was nothing compared to the information we got in the book. The movie left out that Hagrid was accompanied by a limp Maxime, and they also left out that they got into a fight with the giants, which led to Maxime having to use magic. The film also skipped over the information that Walden McNair, Buckbeak's would-be executioner, thwarted Hagrid and Maxime's mission, making the giants pledge their allegiance to Voldemort rather than Dumbledore. Number 6. Angelina Johnson didn't let Ron quit the Gryffindor Quidditch team. For some reason, I completely forgot to record this part in my initial recording, so I'm back to do this. In another part of this series, I went over how Ron joined the Quidditch team during his 5th year rather than his 6th year, and how he helped the team win the Quidditch Cup. However, I didn't go over the fact that Angelina Johnson, the new Gryffindor Quidditch captain who took over for Oliver Wood, refused to let Ron quit when he was playing poorly in both games and in practice. She believed in Ron though, and ultimately, this was a very smart move from the captain considering the results. Number 7. Fred and George Weasley were robbed of all of their life savings. At the Quidditch World Cup, Fred and George made a bet with Ludo Bagman, who was a character completely cut from the films. Bagman was the head of the Department of Magical Games and Sports, and he was a gambler. The bet that the twins made with him was that Ireland would win, but Crumb would catch the snitch. This of course came true, and the twins were owed a boatload of money. However, Bagman refused to pay them, and though the twins spent the whole 4th book trying to get what they were owed, they never did. Man, that's so messed up. Taking 2 kids' entire life savings when their family is literally poor? That's terrible. Number 8. Wormtail did what no other Death Eater could do. Wormtail is a pathetic and weak person, but he did something remarkable. He found what was left of Voldemort in the Albanian forest and helped nurse the Dark Lord back to good health. On top of that, Pettigrew brought Voldemort a ministry employee named Bertha Jorkins, who he had successfully gotten to like him. I don't know how. Her standards must be lower than Bellatrix's Volt and Gringotts. But anyway, Wormtail hoodwinked Bertha, and with the information Voldemort got out of her, it helped form the plan to get his full body back. I guess we kind of underestimated Wormtail, but he's still a pathetic little turd. Number 9. Bellatrix was not there for the Battle of the Astronomy Tower. The films utilized Bellatrix far more than the books did, especially in The Half-Blood Prince. I've said it in other videos, but I would have utilized Helena Bonham Carter as much as possible too. This is because the films added many Bellatrix scenes that weren't in the book, like the Burrow scene. But hey, I would milk Helena Bonham Carter too. Man, what was I thinking with that wording? But getting back on topic, Bellatrix was not there to witness Dumbledore's death, and she was not the one to set Hagrid's hut on fire. In the book, that was a Death Eater named Thorfinn Rao. To be honest though, it would have been really cool to see Bellatrix there for that sequence. She absolutely would have added to the chaos in the battle. Number 10. Molly Weasley lost when facing a boggart. Movie fans were introduced to boggarts in the 3rd film, but what I think is the most wild boggart moment was cut. In the book, Molly went to take care of a boggart while at Grimmauld Place, and this went terribly wrong. She fell apart, crying while sprawled on the floor, as the boggart tortured her, changing from the dead corpse of her husband to all of her children and even to Harry. Following this, she had to be comforted as she sobbed and voiced her fears that her family would die in this war. And unfortunately, she was actually right about that. Number 11. Harry completely destroyed and trashed Dumbledore's office. Following Sirius's death, Dumbledore and Harry had a talk in the headmaster's office, which movie fans saw a small glimpse of. However, this moment was way more in depth in the book, and at the beginning of this conversation, Harry trashed Dumbledore's office, destroying anything he could get his hands on. These actions really show how broken Harry was after Sirius's death. Number 12. Harry and Cho had a disastrous first date. In the 5th novel, Harry and Cho went on a date to Hogsmeade together. While at Madame Puttyfoot's tea shop, the place where all Hogwarts couples went, everything went so wrong. Cho mentioned Cedric, which annoyed Harry. Harry mentioned meeting Hermione during their date, which made Cho jealous, and this led to Cho pointing out Roger Davies, who was in the middle of kissing another girl, telling Harry that he had asked her out, but that she turned him down to be with him. With a few other blunders, all of this led to Cho making a scene, storming out, and leaving Harry there all alone and very confused. Yikes. Number 13. The house elf that movie fans never met. Movie fans of course met Dobby and Creature, but there was one house elf left out of the movies, and that is of course Winky the house elf. She worked for the Crouch family, and her main job was to ensure that Barty Crouch Jr., who everyone thought died in Azkaban years ago, was not discovered. She ultimately allowed Barty Jr. to cast the Dark Mark at the Quidditch World Cup though, and though nobody knew it was Barty Jr., Barty Sr. fired Winky by giving her clothes. She eventually worked in the Hogwarts kitchens, and there she became an alcoholic. At least the house elf version of an alcoholic, as she drank loads of butterbeer to help with her depression. Number 14. Harry's win to loss record in Quidditch. I actually made a pretty cool tweet about this, and if you think this is cool, throw me a follow on Twitter, it's linked down below. The films only showed Harry playing in 4 Quidditch matches, but in the books, Harry played in 9 games, and in those 9 games, Harry finished with a 7-2 record, and if you don't know, that means 7 wins and 2 losses. The only 2 losses that Harry had were when he became unconscious and couldn't finish the match. Harry also won the House Cup 3 different times, and the only times he didn't win the cup was when he missed the final game while in the hospital wing, and when the rest of the season was cancelled because of the Chamber of Secrets. That is the definition of dominance right there. It's clear why everyone thought that Harry could go pro. Number 15. Cornelius Fudge was racist. Technically, this example isn't actually racism, but for lack of a better term, it's the Wizarding World equivalent. When Barty Crouch Sr. went missing, Fudge suggested that Olympe Maxime was responsible for this, showing his discriminatory beliefs against giants, who to some were perceived as lesser than humans. Both Dumbledore and Harry called him out for this, saying that it was not Maxime, and the only reason why he thought that was because he was racist against giants, which of course made Fudge pretty mad. This is just one of many examples that shows how much Fudge sucks. Bruh. Number 14. Lee Jordan put Nifflers in Umbridge's office. Lee Jordan, the Weasley twins' best friend, a friendship that the movies didn't show at all by the way, continued the chaos Fred and George had brought upon the school, putting Nifflers in Umbridge's office. Movie fans met these creatures in Fantastic Beasts, and god do I love these creatures, they are the absolute best. The Nifflers trashed Umbridge's office when looking for gold, but unfortunately, Umbridge thought it was Hagrid who did this, which led to him being fired. Number 17. The DA coins. Movie fans know all about the group Dumbledore's Army, but the films left out the genius way in which they communicated. Hermione made a bunch of fake galleons and put a charm on them, which turned the serial number on the edge of the coin into the time and date of their next meeting. This was so smart because if they were asked to turn out their pockets, Umbridge wouldn't think twice about a galleon, which really shows the brilliance of Hermione. Number 18. Harry's family coming to Hogwarts. For the final task of the Triwizard Tournament, each of the champions had their family come and watch. When McGonagall told the 4 champions that their families were in the entrance hall of the castle, Harry assumed he had nobody out there. While the other 3 went, Harry just sat there, but when McGonagall came back a few minutes later telling Harry that his family was waiting for him, he was flabbergasted. He thought to himself that there was no way the Dursleys were out there. When he came out though, he was greeted by Molly and Bill Weasley. This touched Harry so much, and I'm sure put a smile on every single reader's face. This moment is just so wholesome. Number 19. The Weasley twins threw a snowball at Voldemort's face. This one probably sounds absolutely crazy to movie fans, but it really did happen. In the first novel, Fred and George threw a snowball that hit the back of Quirrell's head, which is where none other than Lord Voldemort himself resided. I've always wondered what Voldemort's reaction to this was. I'm sure he wasn't happy and probably scolded Quirrell for letting this happen. Number 20. Sirius was James Potter's best man at his wedding. Sirius and James were friends turned brothers. Therefore, it's no surprise that James asked Sirius to be his best man when he married Lily. Sirius was honored, and we actually see a picture of this in the book that Hagrid gave Harry at the end of his first year. The picture showed Sirius laughing very happily as he stood at the altar with his two best friends, James and Lily. When Harry discovered that Sirius was his godfather, he looked back at this photo, shocked to see Sirius next to his parents, Harry not even recognizing who we thought at the time was a convicted murderer that betrayed his mother and father. Number 21. Crabbe and Goyle took Polyjuice Potion to become little girls. This is another one that probably sounds crazy to movie fans. The story behind this is that Malfoy had his two cronies turn into little girls when they guarded the Room of Requirement while Draco was working to fix the cabinet in there. Malfoy didn't want the real Crabbe and Goyle keeping guard, as that would of course give him away pretty fast. Crabbe and Goyle were not too pleased about this, but they followed their leader without question. Thank God for them that they later found out they didn't have to do everything that Malfoy said and actually realized that they might be better than him. Well, maybe not better, but definitely more evil, especially Crabbe. Number 22. Hermione got loads of hate mail from Harry Potter fans. Rita Skeeter wrote an article about Hermione starting to date Victor Crumb, adding that she dropped her boyfriend Harry for the pro Quidditch player. Rita had previously written a piece about Harry and Hermione dating, and when readers thought that Hermione had broken the famous Harry Potter's heart, she got loads of hate mail sent to her in the Great Hall. One of these letters shot boobatuber pus on her, causing her to have to go to the hospital wing. Pretty much everyone believed what Rita wrote, and oddly, even Molly Weasley did. Following reading this, she was very cold to Hermione until Harry told her that they had never dated. Molly believing this never really made sense to me, because earlier in this very same book, she was part of a conversation where they said that everything Rita wrote was lies. So why did she believe this one? It makes no sense. Number 23. Arabella Figg was introduced in the first installment, not the fifth. Movie fans met Mrs. Figg in the Order of the Phoenix, but book readers were actually introduced to her character in the very first book. We learned that the Dursleys would send Harry to stay with her when they didn't want to bring him certain places. This was their plan when taking Dudley to the zoo for his birthday, but it didn't work out because Mrs. Figg had broken her leg when tripping over one of her many cats. She does seem like a cat lady. And the book actually said that after she fell like that, she wasn't as fond of her cats. That's just such a small but funny detail to me. Number 24. We met Bill Weasley in the fourth installment, not the seventh. Going off of Mrs. Figg being introduced earlier, the same thing happened with Bill. We met him in the fourth book when he came home for the Quidditch World Cup. On top of that, he had a whole plotline in book 6 where we find out about his relationship with Fleur Delacour. During that same book, Bill was also present for the Battle of the Astronomy Tower, where he was mauled by Fenrir Greyback, getting his face absolutely destroyed. It was so bad that he was unrecognizable following the attack. And that brings us to the 7th installment where he was finally introduced in the movie, and he actually mentions the attack from Greyback.
I was also a werewolf named Greyback.
Number 25. Rufus Scrimgeour was introduced earlier as well. Why not go for 3 in a row? Like Bill, the movies did not introduce Scrimgeour until the 7th installment, but in the book, he was introduced in The Half-Blood Prince. We see him take over the job of Minister of Magic from Cornelius Fudge, and we also see Scrimgeour visit the Weasleys during Christmas break that same year. There, he brings Percy with him, giving him an excuse to drop by, which by the way was super awkward. But the real reason why he was there was to recruit Harry to help with the ministry. Harry shoots him down though, saying that he is Dumbledore's man through and through. Man, I love that loyalty. Number 26. Ron was attacked by a giant brain. This is another one that probably sounds crazy to movie fans. The book did a great job with the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, but they left out so many things that the heroes encountered while there. One of the more wild things that happened was Ron being attacked by these weird brain creatures. Ron had been struck by a curse that made him rather loopy and almost drunk, which led to him using the summoning charm on one of the many brains that resided in a tank. When the brain reached him, giant tentacles shot out of it, which wrapped themselves around Ron like ropes, and they began to suffocate him. Harry tried to get it off with the severing charm, but it didn't work. Eventually, the others were able to get it off, but with great difficulty, and luckily, Madame Pomfrey was able to undo any damage that the brain did to Ron, but it was still a pretty wild sequence. Number 27. A Day in the Life of Vernon Dursley. While the movie started out with Dumbledore, McGonagall, and Hagrid dropping Harry off at the Dursleys' doorstep, the book actually started from the point of view of Vernon of all people. His day started by seeing a cat reading a map, that of course being Minerva McGonagall, and while walking to work, Vernon overheard some strangely dressed people, who were of course witches and wizards, mention a boy named Harry Potter. This terrified Vernon, remembering that that was the name of his nephew. He stressed out about this all day, but don't worry, that didn't stop him from getting a very hefty lunch. Go figure. Then, when Vernon got home, Petunia confirmed that Harry Potter was the name of their nephew, and after seeing some weird things happening on the news, Vernon guessed that his sister-in-law's lot was behind it. As wild as that day was, the next morning would probably be even more wild, as he found the very nephew he was worried about hiding on his doorstep. Number 28. Bellatrix taught Draco occlumency. Movie watchers saw Snape teach Harry occlumency, or at least tried to teach him, but there was another pair doing the same thing, that being Bellatrix and her nephew Draco. She thought it was important for Draco to be able to close his mind before his first Death Eater mission, and she especially wanted to ensure that Draco had mastered this to keep Snape out of his mind, who Bellatrix never trusted. Number 29. Victor Crumb used the Cruciatus Curse on Cedric Diggory. The film showed a little fight between Crumb and Diggory in the maze, but they didn't show how much this escalated like in the novel. Crumb used the illegal Cruciatus Curse or the Torture Curse on Cedric, making him scream and writhe in pain. Crumb was of course under the Imperius Curse when he did this, but even so, it was still a pretty intense moment. And finally, number 30. I saved the most interesting and the most wild fact for last. What happened to Barty Crouch Sr.'s body? While the movie showed Crouch's actual corpse, the book did not. In the novel, he just up and disappeared, nobody knowing what happened to him. As it turned out, his own son, Barty Crouch Jr., who at the time was disguised as Mad-Eye Moody, killed his father. Rather than leaving the corpse out for everyone to see like in the movie, he actually transfigured his father's body into a single bone. He then proceeded to bury this bone in Hagrid's garden, perfectly and expertly getting away with murder. However, he was later forced to admit what he had done when given Veritas Serum, or the Truth Serum, telling Dumbledore exactly how he had gotten away with the murder of his father. Pretty freaking crazy. Like, turning him into a bone? That is a stroke of genius. I bet that after 4 parts, you thought that there was nothing more I could cover. But we are back, baby, with another 30 things that you wouldn't know if you didn't read the Harry Potter books. Number 1. Charlie Weasley helped provide the dragons for the first task. Charlie was unfortunately cut from the movies almost entirely, so there's a lot to go over for his character. But one of the most fun details is that he helped bring the 4 dragons to Hogwarts for the first task. This was of course his job, which the movies actually did mention.
My brother Charlie works with these in Romania.
On top of bringing the dragons, Charlie was also on hand for the actual task, just in case things went wrong and the dragons had to be tamed. Number 2. The first time we were introduced to Nifflers. Movie fans know all about Nifflers thanks to Teddy, as well as the baby Nifflers from the Fantastic Beasts movies. But the first time we were ever introduced to these creatures was in the 4th book. Hagrid had prepared one of his best Care of Magical Creatures lessons as he buried leprechaun gold in the dirt before class. Then during the lesson, he gave each student their own Niffler, and whichever student's Niffler found the most gold, they were awarded a large slab of fudge from Honeydukes, and this ended up going to Ron, whose Niffler found the most. Number 3. Victor Crumb complimented Harry's flying ability on a broom. Having a world-famous Quidditch player who is arguably the GOAT of all Seekers compliment on how good you are at flying is a huge honor. After seeing Harry in the first task, he was so impressed that he said, "You fly very well." Number 4. Lupin went undercover among the werewolves. Lupin played his part in the Order of the Phoenix, and he had perhaps one of the hardest jobs. He went undercover among other werewolves and tried to recruit them to Dumbledore's side. This was so dangerous because most werewolves at this point had joined Greyback, the very werewolf that bit Lupin when he was a child, which I actually went over in a previous video in the series. Lupin ended up having little success, making this dangerous mission not really worth it. Number 5. Snape called Lily Evans a mudblood. The movie went over what's called Snape's worst memory, and film fans saw Snape being bullied by James. What the movie didn't go over though was Snape calling the Muggle-born Lily Evans the worst thing he could have called her when she tried to intervene, effectively ending any relationship he had with her. I can see why this is his worst memory. It ruined any chance he had with his best friend and the love of his life. Ouch. Number 6. What Molly Weasley did for Harry on his 17th birthday. In the wizarding world, it's tradition to give a wizard a watch when he comes of age, that being 17. And when Harry turned 17, Mrs. Weasley wanted to make sure that Harry experienced this. She gifted Harry her brother Fabian's watch, who had passed many years ago, and this touched Harry so much that he got up and hugged her before she had even finished talking. What a wholesome moment, I love that. Number 7. Albus Dumbledore offered to take Voldemort to Diagon Alley when he was a kid. Tom Riddle had the same experience that Harry did, having someone from Hogwarts come and tell him that they were a wizard, and both were offered the opportunity to be taken to Diagon Alley to help them get their wand and school supplies. While Harry of course took this offer with Hagrid, Tom did not take Dumbledore's offer, saying he could do it on his own. This of course aligns with everything we know about him, wanting to do everything his way and by himself. Number 8. Luna Lovegood commented a Quidditch match. This was perhaps the funniest thing that Luna ever did. She went off on crazy tangents, talking about the shapes of the clouds, speculated that Zachariah Smith, who was having a bad game, was suffering from loser's lurgy, and she never even reported the score, making McGonagall have to come in and do so for her. You just can't help but love Luna. Number 9. Dudley became a successful boxer. If you pay really close attention to the film, you can see a tiny picture of this in the background, but it's so small that I doubt most movie fans will spot this, so I'm gonna count it for this video. During the 5th book, we find out that Dudley took up boxing, leading to him losing a lot of weight and making him incredibly strong. Which is crazy considering that 1 book ago, he was described to be wider than he was tall. This strength served him well, as Dudley became the boxing champion at his school. Number 10. Bellatrix had a husband. Bellatrix was a huge focus in the movies, perhaps more so than in the books at times, especially in the Half-Blood Prince. But one thing the movies never went over was her husband Rodolphus Lestrange. Bellatrix marrying him was her fulfilling her family's pureblood mania, bringing the pureblood Black family together with the pureblood Lestrange family. However, that was about all that came out of this marriage, because Bellatrix gave herself to nobody but Lord Voldemort. Number 11. How Sirius escaped Azkaban. After seeing Wormtail, the man that had framed him in a picture with the Weasleys, Sirius was determined to get his revenge. This led to him trying something pretty risky. He turned into his animagus form a dog, allowing him to squeeze through the bars. Being in his dog form, the Dementors weren't able to sense him as much as they could when he was in his human form, so Sirius got past them, then swam across the North Sea until he made it to the mainland. Honestly, swimming that far in pretty rough waters is absolutely insane. I feel like people sleep on how hard this escape would have been to pull off. Number 12. Neville could see Thestrals too. Movie watchers saw that Harry and Luna could see these creatures, but the films failed to mention that Neville Longbottom could see them as well. He had seen his grandfather die of old age when he was a kid, granting him the ability to see Thestrals. We actually find this out in a Care of Magical Creatures class, because just like our first introduction to Nifflers, our first exposure to Thestrals in the book was because of Hagrid. Number 13. Snape was almost awarded the prestigious Order of Merlin. In the 3rd book, it seemed as though Snape had saved the trio and had single-handedly captured the so-called convicted murderer Sirius Black. The Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge himself, told Snape that his efforts would gain him Order of Merlin 2nd class. However, when Sirius escaped, Snape became a crazed lunatic. He began angrily yelling that Harry was somehow behind this. Because of Dumbledore's brilliant plan though, it seemed as though Harry had never left the hospital wing to do so. Fudge was so appalled by Snape's behavior that Snape lost all credibility with the Minister, losing any hope he had of getting the Order of Merlin. Number 14. Harry's tattoo. There was a rumor at Hogwarts that Harry had a giant hippogriff tattooed across his chest. When he and Ginny started dating, Romilda Vane asked Ginny about this, and Ginny told her it wasn't a hippogriff, but a Hungarian horntail. For some reason, Ron believed this rumor, despite the fact that he was there when they literally talked about Romilda Vane asking about this. When it came time for everyone to turn into Harry using Polyjuice Potion, Ron looked down at his chest and said, "I knew Ginny was lying about that tattoo." I'm not really sure why Ron believed this, but okay. Number 15. Voldemort framed his uncle for murder. In an earlier part of this series, I went over how Voldemort killed his father and grandparents, but I didn't go over what happened next. Voldemort had been told of his Muggle father's existence and location by his uncle Morphin. After telling him this, Voldemort stunned Morphin, took his wand, and committed the murders with it. He then returned to Morphin, modified his memory to make him think that he had committed the murders, and left his wand there. This memory modification was done so well that Morphin admitted that he had done it, and when they saw that his wand had the Killing Curse as its most recent 3 spells, the case was closed with no investigation needed. Morphin was sent to Azkaban after being framed by his nephew, and Morphin never even knew that he never did it. This shows you how powerful Voldemort is at magic, especially considering the fact that he was still a student at Hogwarts. He had not finished his Hogwarts training when he did this. That's absurd. He was so powerful. Number 16. Cedric Diggory beat Harry at Quidditch. Movie fans saw the match in which this took place, but in the film, the seeker for Hufflepuff, who was supposed to be Cedric Diggory, was struck by lightning and taken out of the game. In the book though, Cedric actually caught the snitch right before Harry fell, winning Hufflepuff the match and giving Harry his first ever loss in a match that he played in. Number 17. Voldemort set Neville and the Sorting Hat on fire. This one probably sounds pretty crazy to movie fans. Following Harry's death in the Battle of Hogwarts, Voldemort used the summoning charm to make the Sorting Hat come to him. He then forced Neville to his knees, placed the Sorting Hat on his head, and set both of them on fire in front of everyone. As someone whose greatest fear is fire, that's absolutely terrifying. Number 18. Ginny's ex and Harry's ex used each other as a rebound. Movie fans know all about Cho Chang, whose relationship with Harry ended at the end of the Order of the Phoenix. What movie fans might not entirely know, but at least saw, was Ginny with her boyfriend named Michael Corner, who she also broke up with at the end of the 5th installment. Ginny broke up with Michael because he was a sore loser about Ravenclaw being beaten by Gryffindor at Quidditch. This happened because Ginny beat Cho to the snitch, and this led to Cho crying, and guess who swooped in to comfort her? Michael Corner. The two then started dating each other to get over both Harry and Ginny, which is kind of funny considering the fact that Harry and Ginny eventually ended up together. Number 19. Lupin made Tonks' Patronus change forms. Fans of the films know about a Patronus changing shape when a person loves the other, as evidenced by Snape, whose Patronus took the form of a doe, the same as Lily's. What the movies left out though was that this happened to another character, Nymphadora Tonks. She was so in love with Lupin that her Patronus changed from a jackrabbit to a wolf, the same Patronus as Remus. Number 20. Harry disapparated before he even knew he was a wizard. Apparating and disapparating is one of the hardest pieces of magic to do, and as I mentioned in a previous video in the series, you need a license to do it. However, Harry actually performed this piece of magic before he even knew he was a wizard, and he did so without a wand. It happened when he was being chased by Dudley and his gang, and as he jumped behind a trash can to hide, he somehow disapparated from the ground to the top of his school roof. I don't know how he pulled this off, especially without a wand to hone his magic. It really shows just how powerful of a wizard Harry really is. Number 21. Mad-Eye Moody used the illegal Imperious Curse on students. Technically, this was Barty Crouch Jr. disguised as Moody, but this was still wild considering the fact that this took place during a lesson at Hogwarts. And surprisingly, it was actually a really good lesson. Crouch used the curse on each student to show them what it felt like, and the only person to fight it was, you guessed it, Harry Potter, again showing how powerful Harry really is. Number 22. Aberforth broke Albus Dumbledore's nose at their sister's funeral. Movie fans know of Aberforth from the Deathly Hallows Part 2 as well as from the Fantastic Beasts films. However, they don't know about one of his most notable moments. Following their sister Ariana's death, which was covered a bit in the films, they had a funeral for her. There, Aberforth shouted at his older brother in front of everyone, saying that Ariana's death was his fault. He then proceeded to punch Albus in the face so hard that it broke his nose. This is then where Albus got his famous physical description, a crooked nose. Number 23. Hermione used magic to make herself more attractive. In the book, Hermione was described as a plain-looking girl with large buck teeth. The filmmakers actually tried to make Emma Watson have these buck teeth on the first day of shooting, which happened to be the last scene of the first film.
In the book, Hermione has buck teeth. So in the very first scene that we shot in the film, Emma is wearing fake teeth. We realized after the first day of dailies that we could not do that for the entire course of the picture.
Watching this scene, you can kind of tell how big her front teeth are, though they tried their best to hide it.
If you look closely enough, she's wearing false teeth in that last scene to make her more Hermione-like.
But getting back to the novel, Hermione's large buck teeth were made even larger courtesy of a spell cast by Draco Malfoy. When Hermione went to the hospital wing to get them fixed, Madame Pomfrey held up a mirror as she put her teeth back, and Hermione sneakily told her to go a little bit longer to ensure her buck teeth were gone, giving her normal-sized teeth. This change is one of the reasons why she was so shockingly beautiful at the Yule Ball. Number 24. The real way Ron and Lavender broke up. The films actually did an incredible job with their breakup, having Ron say Hermione's name when Lavender was there. In fact, I might actually like it more than what happened in the book. But in the novel, Ron and Lavender did not break up while Ron was in the hospital. They were still together following Ron's recovery. Instead, they broke up after Ron and Hermione had reconciled, which of course made Lavender suspicious. This came to a boiling point when she saw Ron and Hermione coming out of the boys' dormitory together. This wasn't exactly the case, as Harry was next to them, though under the invisibility cloak. Seeing this though, Lavender broke up with Ron on the spot, which was a huge relief to Ron. He really should have ended things much sooner. Number 25. The backstory of Harry using Accio in the first task. Movie fans saw Harry use the summoning charm while fighting the dragon.
Accio Firebolt!
However, in the book, he didn't just magically know this spell. It took a ton of work to be able to master this and ensure that he could really get his firebolt into the arena. He and Hermione spent hours practicing leading up to the task, and Harry actually really struggled with this spell. After all that practice though, he was finally able to master it, which allowed him to pull off one of the most badass moves in the whole tournament. Number 26. Umbridge gave Harry, Fred, and George a lifetime ban on Quidditch. Well, movie fans, here's just another reason to hate Dolores. In a previous part of the series, I went over what led to this ban, which was Harry and George beating the living shit out of Malfoy following a Quidditch match. McGonagall took the two of them to her office, and she gave them a week's worth of detention. However, Umbridge then showed up, and she pulled out a new educational decree that gave her power over all punishments, and she used it to override McGonagall's punishment, instead giving not only Harry and George, but Fred as well, a lifetime ban from ever playing Quidditch at Hogwarts again. Umbridge is just the absolute worst. Number 27. Barty Crouch Jr. got the Dementor's kiss. Fans of the film know all about the character Barty Crouch Jr., but the film never covered what became of his character. They sort of made it seem as though he was just sent back to Azkaban.
Send an owl to Azkaban. Think they'll find they're missing a prisoner.
In reality though, when Minister Fudge came to interrogate him, he decided to bring some Dementors for his own protection. This turned out to be a terrible idea, because as soon as the Dementors saw Crouch, they gave him the Dementor's kiss, possibly the worst fate anyone could ever get. Leave it to fudge things up. Number 28. Colin Creevey died. Movie fans were introduced to Colin in the second film, but we never saw him after the Chamber of Secrets. He was a constant side character in every book following the Chamber of Secrets, and during the Battle of Hogwarts, though he wasn't old enough to fight, he snuck out to join the battle. There he was murdered, and his body was found by Neville Longbottom and Oliver Wood as they collected the dead. When Harry saw his dead body, it crushed him. Number 29. This is one of my favorites. Kingsley Shacklebolt sent the Ministry on a goose chase to find Sirius Black. Being a member of the Order of the Phoenix, Kingsley knew that Sirius was innocent and knew exactly where he was. This made it quite lucky that he of all people was put in charge of hunting Sirius down for the Order office. He ended up telling them that he was following leads into bed, when really Sirius was right there in London in Grimmauld Place. And finally, number 30. I saved the best for last. The Time Room. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries in the movie cut out a crazy part of the battle, which took place in the Time Room. The room was filled with a sparkling light, every type of clock you could think of, and its main centerpiece, a bell jar, which defied space and time. It housed a hummingbird who would hatch from an egg, but when it reached the top, it went backwards, going back into the egg that fixed itself, and this was on a loop for eternity. That is, until the Death Eater Sebastian Lestrange had his head go inside of it, making his head turn into a baby's while his body remained an adult. He stumbled around like crazy, not knowing what to do, and he stayed in this form for the rest of the battle. And that is 150 things that Harry Potter movie fans wouldn't know about the franchise because they didn't read the books. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.